Next, I'd like to welcome to the stage Marc Sedam, who is the Vice President of Technology, Opportunities, and Ventures at NYU Langone Health and New York University.
All right, so I'm going to take us in a different direction for two reasons. One, if I'm squinting, it's because I gave up my glasses to get new ones, so I can't see any of you. So if you're ignoring me, I won't know. So it's good for you. And the second is I've seen David Byrne like 3 times in the last 2 months. And this is going to be a presentation influenced by the talking heads. So half the room will be singing, and the other half of you, if you're under 30, you'll be like, I have no idea what's happening. Take from it what you want to get. So what I want to do is just kind of walk us through, we're at this really interesting moment in time in society where universities are being placed in a location in the public narrative that we're not used to. We're not sort of good anymore. And that's a really interesting place to be. And I'm going to stay mostly out of politics. But, you know, I think there's a reason why. And I think if we don't understand how did we get here, we're at risk of losing a position that I think is really critical for the country, in addition to the work that we all do. So again, every title is a lyric. If you don't know that, I'm really sorry. Go download, just Spotify the Talking Heads. They're amazing. So I want to go back to why do universities actually do research? It's not why you think. So it started really with, of course, universities are the second oldest profession. We've always been teaching people over time. And, you go back to Rome and Socrates and the Platonic ideal of education and all this stuff, and that's great. But research is really a different beast. And you could really bring back the foundations of academic research with the Morrill Act. And the Morrill Act started in Reconstruction in the United States, and it allowed for the creation of the land-grant universities. And for those of you who don't know what a land-grant university is, if you see blank state, that's your land-grant university. There are a handful of states that only have one. My previous employer, University of New Hampshire, was the flagship in the land-grant. But the reason the Morrill Act was created, Morrill, not moral, was to basically make sure that the work being done in the universities left the walls of the academy and got into society. It was predominantly mechanical engineering, but also agriculture, because at the time, 95% of America were farmers. And so the progress inside the university, whether it's crop rotation or the cotton gin or fertilizer, if it didn't get out into society, society didn't improve. And so that was why Abe Lincoln signed the Morrill Act in the middle of the Civil War to say, this is going to be bad. We have to society has to get back on its own feet. That was then followed, however many years later, by Smith-Lever. And Smith-Lever created cooperative extension, which was, again, a way to make sure that each county in each state had a connection to the university so that they could tie in the work being done on campus with being relevant in their backyards. And so if you've ever seen cooperative extension around, they're the people like your soil. I mean, it's New York, so nobody asks what their soil's like. It's really just all pavement. But in most states, it's about hey, how do I grow my flowers? How do I grow these things in my backyard? Why does my grass look the way it does? What is this aphid eating up everything that I have? But in both of these cases, the goal was not education for education's sake. The goal was economic development. The goal was bring to bear on society the benefits of the work being done in the academy for everybody to do better. And again, I can sit here and tell you 1,000 different things, but we'll start with the first one. So if you didn't know, vitamin D, everyone sees vitamin D milk. You've probably never not seen vitamin D milk. Well, vitamin D in milk was created by Dr. Steenbach at the University of Wisconsin. He was a food scientist, and he realized that if you hit UV light onto fats, you could create vitamin D. And vitamin D deficiency is a particular problem in northern country. And so with zapping some milk, he actually solved a public health crisis in the north of the country. By the way, vitamin D deficiency is still kind of an issue in the northern United States. Not as much sun. People need to get out a little more. But he had a previous experience with creating something inside the academy and having it not get out. And so he decided, and they just gave it away and basically nobody picked it up. And so Dr. Steenbach decided, I'm going to patent it myself. I'm going to donate that patent to the university. And I'm going to let the university give it to these dairies to make sure that this technology gets out into society. And that's actually what happened. So this is the first university license to a technology. And again, its purpose was the betterment of society and the improvement of public health. And it's this direct connection. Then we come to war, which a lot of technological innovation comes out of conflict, unfortunately. And so in the run-up to World War II, or I should say the US's participation in World War II, Roosevelt goes to Vannevar Bush and says, looks like we're getting in this thing. Let's figure out how to coalesce all of our science. Let's get our science together. Let's get our ideas together. We know we're going to need to create things that are going to hopefully end the war. So Vannevar Bush starts to gather this stuff together, comes up with some pretty fundamental innovations that we all know and probably don't love, like, the atomic bomb and munitions, but they did help end the war. 2 weeks before we bomb Hiroshima, he publishes Science, the Endless Frontier. And that is a seminal document in the history of the United States science policy. The Endless Frontier basically dictates in some ways, where we are today. It leads to the direct creation of NSF and the next 2 generations of research. So I just wanted to highlight a few of the notable ways that the federal government has invested in science. Now, remember, going back to 1962, there was no investment. The government didn't give anybody money to do anything. Universities are just like, I don't know, I live in New Hampshire and we grow pumpkins, so let's grow some pumpkins and see what happens. And there was no one was giving that money. It just kind of happened wherever it could happen. So we have in 1946, and again, note, this is before NSF, we have the creation of the National Cancer Institute. Creation of NSF in 1950, creation of clinical research at the National Cancer Institute in 53. Between 57 and 61, thanks to the space race, double R&D, triple investment in research. Does anybody know why that happened? What happened in 1957? I know half of you are like, no. Sputnik, the first satellite goes up. Russia puts the satellite in the air and they say, oh my goodness, Russia's in space. We're not in space. We have to do something. And who do they go to? They go to universities to help them solve that problem. They're solving a problem of national relevance, and they're using universities to do that. And what happens? You see this increased investment in research, this increased investment in society with the goal of creating things that are useful. So then we have the National Cancer Act. And then again, 1998 to 2003, we have a doubling of the NIH budget. One, it starts because at aftermath of AIDS, there's a little bit of that, like the investment in HIV research and the pandemic of HIV at the time, but also this recognition that the government is investing in science to improve economic prosperity in the country. That's why they're doing it. They're not doing it because they love science and science is amazing. They're doing it because they want to see something come out of it. And George Bush said he felt like leadership in biomedical engineering and biomedical sciences was going to be the thing that kept the United States ahead of the rest of the world in doing what they do. So what is the point of research, right? We were talking about meta-analysis. We've talked about, I sat in on the last presentation about quantitative analysis, but the point of research is to create and to disseminate knowledge, is to get ideas out into the world, to improve the world in some small place, right? I think sometimes that gets a little lost in the grant writing and in all the ways that we have to do research. You sort of lose the thread. And the thread is that the ideas that we try to create across the $1.5 billion in research at NYU is to create relevant solutions to solve a relevant problem, right? So that's the goal. And this is a slide of a friend of mine. If you've seen me give a presentation before, I show it every time because I think to the extent that I'm a nerd, which I am, this slide is amazing because it fully captures basically everything that happens in science in one form or another. And you'll notice that those outputs are multiple. Publications, materials, technology, innovation, however you want to define it. You can choose your own words, doesn't really matter. You can say, I don't like this word, I want to put a different word in, God bless. But fundamentally, this covers the translation of information from inside the university to outside the university, which is what the goal is. But what I want you to look at is that middle thing. Who are the users of that, right? It's, yes, companies, but it's society and governments and policymakers. And we were talking about that today. And if they don't understand what we do, they're not going to help us. And so part of that is being able to clearly identify the relevance of the work and why the government should fund it. And this is the crisis of our age. So I'll take a little, I run commercialization at NYU, and let me give you another piece of the puzzle here. So between the Endless Frontier, the Science, the Endless Frontier publication, the start of NSF in 1950, in 1979, the government actually owned the outputs of federally funded research. And at the time in 1979, the government had about 28,000 patents under management, meaning the NIH was the owner of the patent, or the US federal government was the owner of the patent. But the policy at the time was that only non-exclusive licenses would happen. And so as a result, under 2% of all technologies created by federal funding were ever licensed. Not a single medical technology was ever created out of those patents. In other words, no products actually came out. What the licenses were basically mostly to defense contractors and some processes and back office of pharmaceutical companies to make things work. But society wasn't benefiting from that. And so there was this law, the Bayh-Dole Act, that was created in 1980 that would attempted to fix that issue. And the Bayh-Dole Act, roll forward about 25 years or 30 years, was called by The Economist as the most inspired piece of legislation to be enacted in America in the last half century. And the reason they said that was because it allowed universities to own the IP and to then do the agreements with industry to allow that technology to get out into the field and be put to work. And it's a pretty phenomenal law. It's very straightforward. It's very simple. It's also under attack right now. Good times. But it's produced trillions of dollars of economic benefit for the country, millions of jobs, and tens of thousands of products across it. And so with this subtle change in a single law, you see science going from like inside the walls of the academy. Sometimes I joke, I'm not an academic, so don't get offended. I say, if you publish an article in the woods and nobody reads it, did it actually get published? So we can be a little insular with our work. It could be for our peers, but if it's not extending past the walls of the academy, it's going to have limited influence. It will have influence over time where 10, 20, 30 years from now, society picks up on some of these things, like, I don't know, the internet, right? But at the moment those things are created, nobody knows what's happening with them. So making it understandable to the world is a really key piece of what we do. And then we have this. So in 2017, for the first time ever, more PhDs went to work in industry than they went to work in academia. So think about what that means for the business model of higher education. Previously, all generations of research funded by the federal government, you'd have great, smart grad students and PhDs and postdocs, all y'all, right? And your goal probably was, I want to do this science and I want to do more science. So I'm going to leave, I'm going to get a job doing science, and I will also get a job doing science. And the flywheel moves forward. It's not working that way now. So the way that we do science and the way that we execute on science inside academia, which used to be, I'm not saying it was the purpose of it, but it used to be sort of a self-replicating cycle. We would create more scientists to create more science, that created more scientists that would create more science inside academia, and lots of good things happened with that. But those jobs aren't there anymore. The academic jobs aren't there anymore. The tenure track jobs certainly aren't there anymore. And so the business model of education is changing in terms of what it means to get a PhD and a postdoc. Some of you in the audience may or may not be thinking that right now. Like, what am I going to do when I graduate? Where am I going to go? And this connection with industry starts to become more and more important. I'm not saying it necessarily influences the science, but the output of science is going to be both things that go into the world, but also the people that go into the world. And where they go is also changing. And here we are. So yes, we have our graduates are going more into industry than into academia. Academic research is still being funded at a reasonable level, but read the papers, maybe not, depends on tomorrow or the next day. We never thought that we would be dependent on administration to have these things happen, but we are. And again, I'm not going to say good, bad, left, right, up, down. It doesn't really matter. But what we have right now in America is an administration that doesn't see the value in what we do. They see some of the value in some of what we do. But the things that we all told ourselves that this was sort of a good, righteous, and joyful thing, and it was always going to be seen that way, is not necessarily so. And on top of that, we have competition for academic positions. We have competition for research. IDC is indirect cost rates, by the way, in case you didn't know that. So the rate at which the cost that it costs to do research is under attack as well. We're standing in the middle of the island of Manhattan, really expensive to do research in Manhattan. And if we don't get our costs, we actually lose money on research when we don't fully recover the costs that support the research. The risk profile of funding is changing. I think we've all, I mean, even I've written some grants, in case you didn't know that. I was 7 for my last 7 grants, and then I stopped writing them because that felt good enough. But, you know, you start to write grants where, let's not kid ourselves, sometimes the things that you write, you already have done some of the work and you know it works, so you write the grant because you know it will be successful, which will continue the flywheel of grant writing. What does that do? It decreases the risk profile of what grants get funded, because you're not funding big risks, you're actually funding certainty. And when you fund certainty, the vision and the power of what you're doing starts to drop. And that's all happening too. And of course, who you know and what you know and who's who's on the panel and who's on the review, that all starts to come in here. So it's not necessarily all egalitarian. Publications become a metric of success. Again, if you publish an article and nobody reads it, what is the impact? I'm not saying long-term it won't have exactly the impact it's supposed to have, but it's a challenge in explaining and communicating that. Even pharma and biotech, the home for some of these opportunities. Like, you don't get Remicade, which was invented at NYU and is the 6th most prescribed drug in the history of modern medicine, doesn't get out into the world unless you have an industry partner for that. So they're becoming more risk averse. There's an attack on intellectual property laws. And increasingly, you're seeing, even in the things like the Nobel Prize, which we all thought were the hallmark of universities, you're starting to see industry research leading to Nobel Prize. In fact, the last presentation was AI-based, and I said this the other week on a different presentation, which I fundamentally believe, which is that AI is the first time that I've ever seen in 30-something years of working in universities where the bleeding edge research is not only being done in universities, a lot of it is being done in industry, and we run the risk of like losing that thread too. So it's kind of a tough world there. So, and yes, I'm intentionally kind of being provocative. So I saw some of the computers close. That was amazing. So but you know, so my issue with everything is just, like, we have to be relevant. We have to talk about the relevance of the work, not the work that we do, not the p-value, but why that stuff actually matters to society. It's the why we do it, not the what we do it, we do. And I know it's easy to get trapped into the what, because the what is how you're evaluated internally, but the what is not how you're evaluated externally. And the way that I like to talk about it is, like, we have lost, and when I say we, I don't mean NYU, I mean most of academia across the United States in this moment has lost the story, has lost that thread. The language that I use is like, K Street has to fund it, Wall Street has to invest in it, and Main Street has to understand it. And if you don't do that, you run the risk of people not understanding what you do, and you find yourself in a time frame that we are right now, where we're saying, wait a minute, you used to like us, you don't like us anymore. Why don't you like us? And it's because actually no one understands why we're doing what we're doing. I mean, it's easy in medicine. I'm not trying to discourage you. It's easy to say we're trying to treat cancer, we're trying to, we're doing a hip replacement. All those things are really understandable. But the vast majority of research, there isn't such a quite a strong through line through. And I think it's really important that we try to draw that, and that we try to make that something that my mother understands. Now, if it makes you feel any better, I've been doing tech transfer for 33 years. My mother still doesn't understand what I do. She says he works at a university and does patents or something like that. But she's not wrong, but it's not quite there. And so where I just kind of wanted to close was, as I was really thinking about this, is meta research is a part of that solution. I think in terms of, the impact on society, where progress comes from, where the benefits come from. I think working across disciplines is going to be where the action is, and actually explaining across disciplines why those disciplines need to work together is where the power of research is going to come back. But what I would challenge you all with is, even at your earliest stage, even in your master's or your first year of your PhD, to be thinking about the story that you want to tell. And not just the story you want to tell your supervisor to let you graduate, but the story you want to tell your mom, your father, the person at the coffee shop. And can you reduce that down to something that's really understandable so that they understand why you're doing what you're doing and what the benefit of society is to doing what you're doing. We're at a moment where we've done that poorly and we need to fix it. And it's going to be this audience that's going to help us fix it. Us oldsters will also try to do that by putting up pictures of the talking heads for 20 minutes. But it is something that it's urgent. And it's something that you need to be thinking about on a daily basis. That's it.